She called me a sweet old man. She said I had no idea. She was right about one thing. I am old. But honey, I've been playing chess since before you were born. My name is Donald Pierce. I've lived in Loudoun County, Virginia my entire life. 74 years. I raised my son Bill on 14 acres of land out in Middleburg. Good land. What it's worth on paper, and that number comes up more than I'd like. But paper doesn't measure the family history in that soil. The years, the love. To me, that's the real wealth, and you can't put a price tag on it. I'm not a flashy man. Never have been. I drive a '06 Toyota Tundra with a crack in the dashboard that I keep meaning to fix. I wear the same 3 flannel shirts on rotation from September through March. I am, by every visible measure, just an old man with some land and a son he loves. Misses Sunday at church, and somebody's calling by Monday morning. That kind of thing doesn't happen because you're rich. It happens because you show up year after year, and you stay decent. That's the only wealth I've ever known how to earn. And somehow, it always found its way back to me. And that was exactly the problem. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Because this story, you are going to want to call somebody. Now let me tell you about Bill. Bill Pierce is 34 years old, sharp as a tack, and works in corporate insurance in Leesburg. Good kid. Great kid, actually. Looks just like his mother. God rest her soul. Same jaw, same eyes that go soft when he's trying not to show you he cares. It wasn't always easy, the two of us, but we made it. This house, this land, and each other. So when Bill called me on a Wednesday morning in late August and said, "Dad, I'm proposing to Alexis this weekend. I need you to be happy about this." "I'm happy if you're happy, son," I said. "That's not the same thing as being happy, Dad." "Bill, can you give her a real chance? Please." I told him yes, and I meant it. I genuinely meant it. I just didn't know what I was saying yes to yet. Now, Alexis Powell. Alexis is 28. She grew up in Alexandria, moved to Loudoun County about a year before she met Bill. Pretty girl. Very pretty, and she knew it. She had this way of tilting her head when she talked to you, like she was really listening, but her eyes were always doing something else. Always scanning. Always calculating. I noticed that the very first time Bill brought her to the house, she came through the front door with both arms open like she'd known me for 20 years. Big smile, warm eyes, the whole production. Donald. Like my name was something she was happy to finally say out loud. She hugged me before I could offer a hand. One of those hugs that last just long enough to feel genuine. She smelled expensive. I noticed that. "It is so good to finally meet you properly," she said, pulling back, holding my arms, looking at me like I was exactly what she'd hoped for. "Bill talks about you constantly. Constantly. I feel like I already know you. All good things, I hope," I said. She laughed. "All good things, I promise." Bill was grinning behind her like a kid on Christmas morning. She walked through my front door and stopped in the entryway, looking around slowly, taking the whole room in. "Donald," she said, pressing both hands together, "this place is wonderful. It feels like a real home." She noticed the photographs on the wall before I could say a word, moved along them one by one, careful like she had all the time in the world. She stopped at the one of birth in me on the porch. "Is this Bill's mother?" she asked softly. She was beautiful. She looked at me. You can just feel how much she was loved. She asked about the family, how long I'd been in Loudoun County, what Middleburg was like when Bill was growing up, whether I'd always been on this land. The kind of questions that make a man feel like his life has been worth something. And then, somewhere in the middle of all that warmth, she tilted her head and said, "How long have you had the place?" I didn't think much of it then, just another question in a long, easy conversation. I didn't understand what she was really after. I clocked that, filed it away, said nothing. "About 35 years, I said, handing her a glass of sweet tea. "And the land around it? Is that all yours too?" Bill jumped in. "Alexis, we just got here. I'm just curious," she laughed, touched his arm, smiled at me. "I grew up around real estate people. I just always appreciate land. It's the one thing they can't make more of, right?" She winked at me. Oh, she was smooth. I'll give her that. She was very, very smooth. And I'll tell you the honest truth, I was starting to like her. She had a warmth to her that felt real, and there's only so long an old man can keep his arms crossed. I smiled back. Can't argue with that. Fast forward to Saturday, September 6th, The engagement dinner. Bill had reserved the private dining room at the Market Salamander out on Madison Street in Middleburg. Nice place and expensive too. Bill had invited about 15 people. His cousin Ray, a few friends from work, Alexis's friend Veronica, and Alexis's mother, a woman named Judith Powell who smiled with her mouth only. The apple doesn't fall far. Dinner was lovely. Bill gave a little speech. Alexis cried. Beautifully, of course. Just enough tears, none of the mascara moved. Everyone clinked glasses. I sat at the head of the table and I watched. And I smiled and I meant it, because that's my son. I love him, and I'm happy for him. Then I excused myself to use the restroom. The Salamander's private dining room sits at the back of the restroom. The hallway to the restrooms runs along the side. There's a little alcove near the end where they keep the wine storage. Narrow. Quiet. That's where I heard her. I almost walked past. But something, I don't know, something made me slow down. Alexis's voice. Low. Careful. No, I'm telling you, he has no idea. The man drives an old truck and wears the same jacket every time I see him. He's completely checked out. I stopped. Don't move, Donald. Do not move. The land alone, Tommy, I had it looked at. 14 acres in Middleburg. We're talking 7, maybe 8 million, depending on the zoning. And he hasn't done a thing with it. My hand was on the wall. The plan stays the same. Once we're married, I work on Bill. Get him warmed up to the idea of putting my name on things. The old man clearly hasn't sorted out any estate planning. Bill mentioned once he doesn't even have a will. Silence while she listened. No, I'm not rushing it. I'm being smart. He thinks she laughed quietly. He thinks I'm just a sweet girl from Alexandria who loves his son. He's a sweet old man, Tommy. He has absolutely no idea. And then I heard her heels on the floor, moving back toward the dining room. I stood in that alcove, completely still. $7-8 million. She had it looked at. She already had it looked at. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. At some point the wine storage just became a wall I was staring at, and I had to remind myself to breathe. Here's the thing about a moment like that. You expect rage. You expect your hands to shake, your vision to go red, your feet to carry you back into that dining room to flip a table and end the whole production right there. But that's not what happened. What happened was I got very, very quiet inside, the way Middleburg gets quiet in the early morning before anybody's awake. That deep, quiet country where you can think clearly. I straightened my jacket. I walked to the restroom, washed my hands, looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. An old man looked back at me. Old, but not finished. I walked back into that dining room, sat down at my seat, picked up my glass of wine. Alexis caught my eye across the table and gave me the warmest smile I had ever seen in my life. I raised my glass to her. To family. I said, to family, everyone repeated. Bill was beaming. And I had already begun. See, here's what Alexis Powell didn't understand about me. I'm not a man who moves fast. Never have been. Berth used to say, Donald Pierce could watch a storm coming from 3 counties away and still finish his coffee before he stood up. I take my time. I think things through. I don't act until I know exactly what I'm doing and exactly what it's going to cost. And that night, driving home down Route 50 through the dark Virginia countryside, windows down, that cracked dashboard lit up by the faint glow of the radio, I wasn't panicking. I was planning. She thought the land was unprotected. She thought I was clueless. She thought she had time on her side. All 3 of those things were about to become her greatest mistake. But before I tell you what I did, I need to tell you what I found out. Because the man she called Tommy, he wasn't just a friend. And this thing was bigger than I thought. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, not because I was heartbroken. I sat in the leather chair in my study, the one Bertha picked out at an estate sale in Purcellville back in 2003. The one with the small tear on the left armrest that I never fixed because I like the way it feels under my thumb when I'm thinking. And I sat there until the sky outside my window went from black to navy to the pale gray of a Virginia dawn. 14 acres. 7, maybe 8 million. She had it looked at. Those words just kept circling. I'm not a man who cries easily, but I'll be honest with you, somewhere around 3 in the morning, I thought about Berth. About how hard we worked for this land. About the years we ate simple so we could hold on to it. About how she used to walk the property line every Sunday morning with her coffee, just because she loved it, just because it was ours, and some woman in a restaurant was already dividing it up in her head. I pressed my thumb into that tear in the armrest. Then I picked up my phone. The first call I made was to my attorney. His name is Robert Gaines. Been my attorney for 19 years. Has an office on Cornwall Street in Leesburg, and is possibly the least dramatic man I have ever met in my life. Which is exactly why I trust him completely. I called him at 7:45 Sunday morning. He answered on the second ring because Robert Gaines has never taken a day off in his life. Donald. Robert. I need to see you Monday morning, first thing. A pause. How bad? Bad enough that I'm calling you on a Sunday. I'll move my 8 o'clock. Be here at 7:30. That's it. No questions. No fuss. 19 years. That's what loyalty sounds like. Monday morning, I was sitting across from Robert at 7:25. I told him everything. The dinner, the alcove, the phone call, the number she quoted, the name, Tommy. Robert didn't interrupt once. He sat with his hands folded on his desk and listened the way only lawyers and priests know how to listen, like every word is evidence. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, you said she mentioned zoning. She did. Specifically? She said 7, maybe 8 million, depending on the zoning. Robert leaned back. Donald, that's not a girlfriend making assumptions. That's someone who paid for a professional assessment. Zoning specifics on Middleburg acreage aren't public dinner conversation. Someone ran the numbers for her. I already knew that. Hearing Robert say it out loud made it heavier. I want everything protected, I said. Everything. I want it done right, and I want it done quietly. How quiet? Bill cannot know. Not yet. Robert looked at me carefully. That's going to make certain structures more complicated. I don't care about complicated. I care about airtight. He nodded slowly. Picked up his pen. All right. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert built an irrevocable family trust around everything I owned. The land. The property. 2 smaller parcels I'd acquired over the years out toward Bluemont. All of it moved, structured, and legally recorded with Loudoun County before the last week of September. The trust had specific language. Bill was the sole beneficiary. Any future spouse would be required to sign a prenuptial agreement reviewed by an independent third-party attorney before gaining any interest whatsoever. No exceptions. No workarounds. It was, in Robert's words, Alexis-proof. But here's the part that mattered. Here's the part I want you to understand. We moved everything quietly. No announcements. No conversations. I didn't change my routine by a single degree. And when Alexis called me that second week of September, cheerful, warm, that Alexandria sweetness turned all the way up, I was nothing but charming right back. Donald, I was thinking we should have Sunday dinner soon. I want to learn how to make that Brunswick stew Bill keeps talking about. Any time you want, sweetheart, I said. The door's always open. Now, let me tell you about Tommy. I didn't have a last name. Just a voice on the other end of a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. But I had a thread. And I've learned in 74 years that one thread, pulled carefully, unravels everything. I reached out to a private investigator named Frank Delaney. Frank operates out of Sterling, Virginia. Retired Loudoun County Sheriff's Deputy. Knows every county road, every local face. And most importantly, knows how to be invisible. I gave Frank 3 things. Alexis Powell's name. The name Tommy. And the fact that whoever this man was, he knew enough about Middleburg land value and zoning to quote specific numbers to a woman at a dinner party. Frank called me 6 days later. You sitting down? Frank, I'm 74 years old. I'm always sitting down. Thomas Whitfield. Tommy goes, he runs Whitfield Property Group out of an office in Ashburn. Mid-sized developer, been trying to acquire land parcels in the Middleburg and Upperville corridor for about 3 years. Residential conversion projects. The room got very still. He's been blocked on 2 major acquisitions because the private landowners won't sell. Frank continued. Your property sits right between those 2 parcels, Donald. You're the missing piece. If he gets your 14 acres, he connects everything. I exhaled slowly. There's more, Frank said. Of course there is. Alexis Powell and Thomas Whitfield have been in a personal relationship for 14 months. They kept it quiet. Different social circles. She moved out to Loudoun County, started fresh. But I've got photos, financial records, the works. She didn't just stumble into your son's life, Donald. She was placed there. I want you to let that land for a second. 14 months. She'd been with Bill for just under 2 years, which means somewhere around month 6 of their relationship, when things got serious. Tommy Whitfield entered the picture. or never left it. My son thought he found the love of his life in Leesburg. What he actually walked into was a business transaction, and he was the last one to know. I'm going to be real with you right now because this is the part of the story that people skip over and they shouldn't. There was a Thursday evening, mid-October, cool night, that particular Loudoun County dark that settles in early once the leaves start turning, where I sat on my back porch and I genuinely didn't know how to feel. The land was protected. Robert had handled that. Frank had given me everything I needed. I held all the cards. But Bill, my son, he was planning a wedding. He was happy. The specific kind of happy that you only see on a man who thinks he's finally found his person. He'd called me the week before talking about venues, about honeymoon ideas, about whether I thought a spring wedding or a summer wedding made more sense. And somewhere in Ashburn, Thomas Whitfield was waiting for a phone call. I could have told Bill right then, sat him down, laid out every document, played it straight. But here's what stops you when you're a father. You don't just deliver information. You deliver an explosion. And once you pull that pin, you cannot control what it destroys on the way down. Bill might not believe me. Alexis might cry, deny everything, and suddenly I'm the bitter old father who never accepted her. She'd been building that narrative carefully. I could see it now in hindsight. Every time she deferred to me at dinner, every time she said Donald would know best in front of Bill, she was constructing a version of events where any accusation I made looked like jealousy, like an old man who couldn't let go. She was good. She was really, genuinely good. So I made a decision that night on that porch. I wasn't going to tell Bill anything. I was going to let Alexis tell him herself. The trap had two parts. Part one, I kept performing. Sweet old Donald, completely unaware, nothing to see here. I even mentioned casually to Alexis during that Sunday Brunswick stew dinner that I'd been meaning to get my affairs in order but hadn't quite gotten around to it. She almost dropped her fork. Almost. "Oh, Donald, you know Bill and I would be happy to help with any of that," she said, touching my arm. "Paperwork can be so overwhelming." "You know what? I might just take you up on that," I said. Bill smiled at both of us like his whole world was coming together. I felt sick, and I felt certain, both at the same time. Part two, I called Frank. Told him I needed one more thing. I needed every document, every photo, every financial record organized into a single clean package. Dated, sourced, airtight. "What are you building?" Frank asked. "A table," I said. "And I'm going to let her sit down at it before she realizes what it is." Frank was quiet for a second. Then, "Donald, I've worked with a lot of people in bad situations. Most of them panic. Most of them move too fast. I know. You haven't panicked once. No. Why not?" I looked out my study window at the 14 acres. And just like that, the memories came without asking. Everything we ever went through as a family happened on that ground. Every hard year. Every good year. Every year in between. This land was never actually in danger, because letting go was never something the Pierce family was built for. I said, I just needed her to believe it was. Frank laughed, short and low. "Lord have mercy." "Not yet," I said, "but soon." By the first week of November, Alexis was moving fast. Too fast. She suggested to Bill that the family should have an estate planning meeting, her words, before the wedding. Get everything organized. Make sure everyone was protected. She even offered to bring someone who could help facilitate. Bill called me, a little uncertain. "Dad, I think she's just trying to be helpful." Bill, "Yeah, tell her Sunday works for me. My house. 2:00. "Yeah? Yeah. Tell her to bring whoever she wants." I hung up. "Bring whoever she wants. Bring Tommy Whitfield if you feel like it. Bring your documents. Bring your drafted agreements. Bring everything you've been building for 14 months. Come sit at my table. I'll have coffee ready." Because what none of them knew, what Alexis and Tommy and Judith Powell and whoever else was waiting on the other end of that plan had no idea about, was that 6 weeks ago, quietly on a Tuesday morning in Robert Gaines's office on Cornwall Street in Leesburg, it was already done. Every acre, every parcel, every blade of grass on that Middleburg property. Already moved, already protected, already recorded with the county. The land they had spent over a year scheming to take, it was never on the table. It was the table. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. Some people spend their whole lives building something. Others spend their whole lives looking for something someone else built. The difference between those two kinds of people becomes very clear. At a Sunday afternoon meeting in Middleburg, Virginia. Sunday arrived the way November Sundays do in Loudoun County. Cold, gray, still. The kind of morning where the sky sits low over the hills and everything smells like wood smoke and dried leaves and something final. I was up at 5. Not because I was anxious. I want to be clear about that. I slept better that Saturday night than I had in 2 months. I was up at 5 because I had things to arrange. And Donald Pierce does not leave things to the last minute. Not when it matters. I made coffee. Strong. The way Berth taught me. 2 extra scoops. Let it sit. I stood at my kitchen window looking out at the land in the early dark. 14 acres of Virginia soil that had outlasted a mortgage, outlasted heartbreak, outlasted every person who ever looked at it and thought they saw an opportunity. It was still here. So was I. I called Robert Gaines at 8. You ready? He said. Been ready. You still coming at 1:30. I'll be there at 1:15. Bring the full package. Everything. It's already in my car, Donald. I hung up and finished my coffee. Bill arrived at noon. Alone. Alexis was coming separately. Her idea, which told me everything. She wanted a few minutes without Bill, to set up her people, arrange her documents, and control the room before the meeting started. She was treating my house like a boardroom. Bill came through the front door with 2 bags of groceries because that's my son, showing up to a war with sandwich bread and good intentions. Dad, you doing all right? Never better, I said. Hungry. We made sandwiches in the kitchen. Turkey on white, the same lunch I made him every Saturday when he was 12 years old. We didn't talk about the meeting. We talked about the land, about a fence post on the north end that needed replacing, about whether the Washington football team had any shot at a decent season. Normal. Ordinary, sacred. At some point, Bill got quiet, leaned against the counter, looked at me the way he does when something is sitting on him. Dad, I know you've had some reservations about Alexis. I kept my eyes on my sandwich. I want you happy, Bill. That's still not the same as being happy. There it was. Same conversation. August to November. I looked at my son, 34 years old. Berth's jaw. Berth's eyes. Holding a turkey sandwich in my kitchen like he was 19 again. Give me till 3 o'clock, I said quietly. What? Just trust me till 3 o'clock. Can you do that? He studied my face for a long moment. Yeah, Dad, he said finally. Okay. Alexis arrived at 1:40 with 2 people in tow. The first was Judith Powell, her mother. Mouth-only smile. Sensible coat, the energy of a woman who had been waiting a long time for a payday. The second was a man I had never met in person, but recognized immediately from Frank's photographs. Thomas Whitfield. He was about 40. Firm handshake. Expensive watch. The kind of man who walks into a room and immediately starts measuring it. He introduced himself as a family financial advisor, helping Alexis organize some estate documentation. Bill shook his hand, confused but polite. That's my boy. Too decent for the room he was standing in. I shook Tommy's hand last, held it just a half-second longer than necessary. Looked him directly in the eye. Thomas Whitfield, I said. Whitfield Property Group, Ashburn, Virginia. Something moved behind his eyes. Fast. Gone. That's right, he said carefully. Good firm, I said pleasantly. Heard you've been working the Middleburg corridor for a few years now. Tough market out here. Landowners can be stubborn. A very long beat. They can be, he said. I smiled. Sit down. Coffee's on. Robert arrived at 1:45 carrying a leather portfolio the size of a small suitcase. He sat down next to me at the dining room table and said nothing. Just folded his hands and waited. 19 years. The man is a monument. Alexis set up her side of the table with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment many times. Documents in a neat stack. A drafted land transfer proposal. Clean. Professional. Suggesting that for estate planning purposes the property be jointly titled before the wedding. Everything designed to look reasonable, protective even. She had clearly paid someone good money for that paperwork. I almost felt bad about what was coming. Almost. Well, Alexis said with a warm smile, looking around the table. I'm so glad we're all doing this together. I just think it's so important for families to be on the same page financially. Donald, I know this stuff can feel overwhelming. It really can. I agreed. And we just want to make sure everything is protected. For you. For Bill. For all of us going forward. She slid the transfer documents across the table toward me. I looked down at them. Didn't touch them. Let them sit there. Then I looked up at Robert. Robert opened the leather portfolio. Before we get into your documents, I said, I want to share something with the table. I slid the trust paperwork across first. Clean copies. County recorded. Robert's firm letterhead on everything. 6 weeks ago, I restructured my entire estate into an irrevocable family trust. Every parcel, every acre, all of it. Bill is the sole beneficiary. Any future spouse requires a prenuptial agreement reviewed by an independent attorney before gaining any interest of any kind. I paused. It's already recorded with Loudoun County. It's done. The room was very quiet. Alexis stared at the documents. The color moved in her face, not all at once, but in stages, like watching a building lose power floor by floor. Tommy Whitfield had gone completely still. Bill was looking at me. Then I reached into the portfolio and pulled out Frank's package. Now, I also want to introduce some information about Thomas here. I set Frank's report on the table. Photos on top. 14 months of documentation underneath. Financial records, communications, the whole architecture of a plan that started long before anyone at this table admitted it. Thomas Whitfield has been in a personal relationship with Alexis Powell for 14 months. I said it the way you read a weather report. Calm, factual. Inevitable, his company has been attempting to acquire land in the Middleburg corridor for 3 years. My 14 acres connect 2 parcels he's already been blocked on. Together they represent a development project worth considerably more than $8 million. I looked at Alexis, which you already knew, because you had it assessed. Silence. I know about the phone call, sweetheart. The alcove at the Market Salamander. September 6th. I tilted my head slightly. You said I was a sweet old man with no idea. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. You weren't entirely wrong, I said. I am old, and I can be sweet. Bill stood up. Not dramatically, not loudly. He just stood. Pushed back from the table and stood, and looked at Alexis the way a man looks at something he's trying to understand but can't quite fit together in his mind yet. Bill, Alexis started. How long? His voice was flat. Bill, this isn't... Alexis, how long? Tommy Whitfield made the catastrophic decision to speak. Look, Bill, this is a business misunderstanding. Nobody was trying to... You need to stop talking. Bill said it without even looking at him. Right now you need to completely stop talking. Tommy stopped talking. Bill looked at Alexis for a long moment. She was crying now. Real tears this time. But the math was wrong. Too late. Too convenient. Even the tears were a strategy. Get out of my father's house, Bill said quietly. Bill, please just let me... Alexis. One word. Final. A door closing. She gathered her documents. Her hands were shaking. Judith Powell stood up without a word. Didn't look at anyone, just picked up her coat and her dignity and walked out first. Tommy Whitfield buttoned his jacket, picked up his portfolio, and as he passed me, he stopped, looked at me. I looked back. The land you needed, I said quietly. I've actually decided to develop it myself. Starting spring. I smiled. Gonna be beautiful out here. He left without a word. The front door closed. It was just me and Bill and Robert. Robert quietly repacked his portfolio, stood up, shook both our hands, and said he'd see himself out. Bill sat back down across from me. He was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the gray November sky had settled over the hills, and the tree line stood dark against it, and the 14 acres just sat there the way they always had. Patient, quiet. Hours. Dad. His voice was thick. Yes, son. How long did you know? Night of your engagement dinner. He closed his eyes, opened them. And you didn't say anything because I needed you to see it, I said, not hear it. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. We sat there for a while, not saying much. The coffee went cold. The light outside shifted. At some point I got up and made more sandwiches because I didn't know what else to do, and neither did he, and that was fine. Some things don't need words. They just need a father who was paying attention. Alexis Powell left Loudoun County 3 weeks later. Quietly. The engagement was never officially announced in the paper, so there was nothing to retract. She just disappeared. Back to Alexandria, I assume. Back to Tommy Whitfield, and whatever the next plan was. Thomas Whitfield's Middleburg corridor project collapsed without my parcel. Last I heard, he was refinancing. Loudoun County land doesn't wait for anybody. And Bill is fine. Better than fine. He had a few hard months. I won't pretend otherwise, but he's standing. He's whole. The land is in trust. The name Pierce is on it for the next generation. And some Sunday mornings when the light is right, I walk the property line with my coffee, just like Birth used to, just because I love it, just because it's ours. And nobody is ever going to take that from my family again. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.